Today, we're honored to have Heidi Wright, principal at Lakeview Christian Academy, joining us. Heidi brings a wealth of experience in navigating the delicate balance between professional life and faith. In this episode, we'll dive into how Heidi integrates her Christian values into her leadership role, fostering a supportive environment at Lakeview Christian Academy. We'll discuss practical strategies for maintaining integrity, finding strength in faith during challenges, and creating a workplace culture rooted in compassion and purpose. Join us as we uncover Heidi's insights on living out faith in the professional sphere, discovering how principles from the Bible can guide us in making impactful decisions and nurturing meaningful connections in our careers. Hey friend, welcome to the Between the Pages podcast, where we explore navigating life's peaks and valleys with bold faith. Join us bi-weekly as we dive into meaningful conversations with guests, team members, and community leaders. Together, we'll tackle topics that challenge and encourage, helping you live out your faith between the pages of everyday life. Welcome, friends, to the Between the Pages podcast. Heidi, we're so excited that you decided to join us. We are so honored that you're here.
I'm thrilled to be joining you as well today. Thank you.
I will say, not to put any pressure on this, you are our first guest of season 3 of the podcast.
Ooh, no pressure, but I'm excited.
First guest in the studio as well. So it is a big, big day, and we are just so excited for your wisdom, your knowledge, especially as us as young professionals, like just getting to pick your brain a little bit of how to balance professional life with a career and all the things that come with challenges in the workplace. So thank you again. And before we dive into all the meat and potatoes of the episode, why don't you just introduce yourself so our audience can get to know you, any fun facts about you, what you do, what you love, all the things.
Absolutely. So I am a lover of Jesus, family, and coffee in those
Amen.
orders.
Amen.
My husband and I have been married for 26 years. We have 4 kids, which adds just a wonderful component to our life. And I am the principal at Lakeview Christian Academy. And just fun tidbit, I was a teacher there first. Actually, before that, I was even a student there. So I feel like the Lord planted my love for Lakeview in my heart at a very young age. And it's just been really fun to see how he has taken that love of this school and hopefully used it for his glory in my life there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so coffee is a big thing. Are you?
Yes, ma'am.
Black coffee, a little latte?
Coffee and cream. I have to taste the coffee in it.
Okay.
Frou-frou stuff just really isn't for me, although, you're all welcome to it, but
hey,
I need to have the coffee taste strong and prevalent.
I feel that. Okay, I feel like this could be a controversial topic right off the bat. But Starbucks or Caribou? Or, we could throw in Dunkin' or...
I have to say I'm kind of neither. I have really started...
Keurig. The K-cup.
All of our local coffee shops have really captured my heart. I just, I know we have 190 in Duluth. That has become one of my favorites, Duluth's best bread. I just have really enjoyed just what an exceptional job they do.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to be a supporter of them.
Yeah. I was just at Yellow Bike before this too, so it was like, perfect.
So many
Amity
great ones.
is a good one.
Yeah.
So many. Perk Place.
Yes, yes.
Man.
We could just talk coffee
Right.
all the time, and I would be very happy.
Scratch it. We're not talking about careers. We're talking about coffee.
Yes.
Hey, honestly though, Jesus, Bible, coffee.
Yes.
I always say to y'all, watching, grab your pen, grab your Bible, grab a cup of coffee.
Yes.
We're going to dive into all the things, especially those who are in a career, heading into a career, but even college students who are getting ready to navigate adulthood in the workplace. This is an episode for you. I'm so excited. So Heidi, going from your experience, like you had said, you were a student at Lakeview Christian Academy, then you were a teacher, and then you became the principal.
I did.
That's a lot to cover, but give us a brief overview of just kind of your professional career, college-wise, some maybe highlights that really kind of pointed you back of, I know I won't say where you went to school because I'm going to let you say that, but go with my alma mater.
Yes.
But how you even got back to Duluth too.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I really fell in love with Christian education, but specifically Lakeview Christian Academy when I was in kindergarten. I remember sitting as a kindergartner looking up at the 100s chart, and I would watch my teacher write on the chalkboard. And I think it was my love of Jesus started when I was very young, and my love of learning and teaching. And I'm sure there was some natural bossiness that came in there too. But I knew at a young age that I was going to be a teacher and that I wanted to teach at Lakeview Christian Academy. And that really did not waver. I went on to Bethel College in the
Whoop,
Twin
whoop.
Cities. Now I know it's Bethel University. And I pursued a degree in elementary education. And my freshman year, I met my husband, and our first conversation, I laid it on the line and I just said, you need to know that I believe I'm called to teach at Lakeview Christian Academy. So when I graduate, I'm going back to Duluth. Are you okay with that? And
Way
he
to
was
put
a
it on
very-
the line right at the beginning. You're like, here it is.
Yeah.
Saying it as it is, take it or leave it. I love
Yeah,
that.
But
I love that.
I knew definitively that God had called me to that. And I just needed to know that who I was becoming one with as a married couple shared that vision with me and affirmed that calling, and he did. And so as soon as I graduated, we packed up our bags, and we were married by that time. And we moved north to Duluth, and I applied for a teaching position, and they did not have one at that time. And I thought, all right, Lord, I'm going to go into a holding pattern and see what you have. And fortunately, 6 months later, I was able to take over for a former teacher of mine who left on maternity leave. And I was there for a brief time before we started our own family, but returned when our kids were all school age and have been there ever since. And it's really just been God confirming a calling in my heart and opening the right doors for me to step into along the way.
And I want to dive into, because I think especially for the like college age students, when you say like I felt called to do this, like was there ever like a moment where you're like, this is like God either flat out saying it, be like, you're going here, or like how did you kind of navigate this calling? Because I think everyone can experience that calling differently, but I also feel like that's a lot of what people struggle with nowadays, especially going into like a workforce and like a society that's not necessarily like very saturated in the workplace of Christian values. And it's like, what do I even like, what should I do? Like, what was you in your experience, like how you found that calling? You know, yes, obviously from a young age you kind of had that draw, but like that confirmation, and how did you kind of navigate that? Or maybe even your husband was like, what?
Yeah, I think a couple critical things happened for me, and I will say this isn't the way that God always works. But I think there was an initial desire and initial passion that I felt that I had to teach, and that didn't diminish. And so the next step of, I would say, the Lord confirming that calling was that others saw those giftings in my life. Other trusted people that I knew loved me and loved the Lord then affirmed those giftings. And I think the final thing is that the Lord didn't close the doors. Not everything happened in the timing that I would expect. I think ideally I thought I'm going to graduate and walk into a job that fall, and it didn't happen. But yet my desire to be there didn't subside. But on the flip side of that, I have had students over the years that have asked me, how do I know God's will for my life?
Oh, that's a deep question.
It is. And I think adult Heidi now, who has matured in my walk with the Lord and who has just a very imperfect but a richer and deeper understanding of the gospel and of Jesus, emphatically will say, it is not about what is God's will for my life. It is about who God has called you to be. And that is a pursuer and an obeyer and a lover of Jesus. And whether that means you step into this position or this position or this position, those are really less than worries. It's who am I in Christ and what has he called me to be in him and because of the gospel of Jesus. And then we can rest in the fact that God doesn't always reveal things right away, but we
Mhm.
can trust his plan as we are obeying and pursuing him.
Oof. Man, we're already getting deep and we're only a few minutes in. I love this. And
Good.
I think truthfully, it does, like you said, it really comes down to like, where are you placing your identity?
Yes.
Mhm.
Are you placing your identity in the Lord, or are you placing
Mhm.
your identity in what you want to become, not what God wants you to become?
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I know for me, like I'm even struggling. I'm like, do I even want to work in the event industry
Mhm.
anymore? Like, is that what I wanted or what God wanted? And I've
Yes.
been in it for almost 12 years now, which is like crazy. And now I'm like having this existential crisis, I feel like, because I'm like, what am I like actually called to? Because I mean, any interview that I do, they ask me like, "Oh, why did you want to become an event planner or go into the event
Yes.
industry?" And I hate to say it, but it's because I watched The Wedding Planner with J-Lo in it, and I said, "That will be me one day."
Oh.
And I was like, "And I'm going to do it." And then it's like I did, but then I'm like, "But then what?"
Mhm.
Like I already accomplished what that was, but it's like, okay, now I need to backtrack. Like, was my identity in that
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
I'm going to be that,
Yeah.
or is it going to be this is what God has for me, and it's going to be scary because it's not going to be what I've done the last 12 years.
Well, and I think the beautiful thing is that as we are growing and maturing in our walks with the Lord, he graciously uses us even when we are at less mature stages. So
Mhm.
I may choose something for what I look back and say, maybe that wasn't the best reason I pursued it. And yet I can look back and see, and yet in spite of myself, God used me in that. I learned, be, in that process. And I learned about him in that process too. And I find as I'm looking at, okay, Lord, what do you have next for me? Am I to remain? Are you calling me to something different? The questions I'm finding I'm asking more aren't necessarily, Lord, what is the specific detail that you're calling me to next? But what is the next opportunity for me to learn and to grow in my trust and my walk with you as I wait for you to reveal that?
That's good. Man, do I need that right now. We were just talking about like just career changes and things like that. And
Yeah.
I'm like, woo,
Mhm.
is the Lord speaking to me? So we kind of navigate, kindergarten
Mhm.
Heidi to Bethel Heidi
Yeah.
to now you're teaching Heidi.
Yeah.
But now we have starting teaching Heidi to now principal Heidi.
Yes.
And Jenny's also a teacher at Lakeview Christian
I
Academy.
am. Yeah.
Fun
Yeah.
fact for you all, they're coworkers. And there's probably been a lot of this was like kind of from what I've read and understood from like the way you got to where you were, there was certainly some challenges and struggles
Yes.
jumping into that. So,
Yes.
like certainly like what was that like overall teaching to principal Heidi? Like
Mhm.
how did that become, not necessarily getting into all the details, but like
Yeah.
just kind of, whoa, God, what is going on? And
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
we'll kind of unpack all of that challenge wise, all the things as we kind of continue our conversation.
Yeah, it was definitely a gradual shift. I went from teaching to being more the marketing director to then being called into the position of principal. And in both cases, um, it wasn't something that I sought out. It was something that was brought to me
Mhm.
and said, would you consider this? And I'll be honest, that first step out of teaching for me, I wasn't sure that I wanted to do that. I love teaching.
And that was always your passion.
It
Right,
was
right.
my passion. I loved being in the classroom. I loved seeing the learning take place with my students. I loved that connection with my students. And I remember wrestling as I was deciding whether I should say yes to this next opportunity, feeling like I knew very well what I was letting go, but
Mm.
I didn't know fully what I was being asked to step into. And so I did a lot of kind of in a shorter amount of time what I did in feeling the confirmation over entering education to begin with is I looked at, did I feel like God had equipped me with some natural giftings to say yes to this next role? Was it being affirmed and confirmed by those around me that I trusted to speak into my life? And there was still this gap of it felt like a risk,
Mhm.
but I had the Lord's peace that this was what I was supposed to do next. I was affirmed by others. And I just remember saying, Lord, I don't know what you have in store for me here. I know that there are things you're going to have to supernaturally gift me in, because there are things I'm gifted in and some that I don't feel like are my strength. And so it felt like a leap of faith
Mm-hmm.
to say yes. And each time there has been that shifting in position, I will say that it's required a leap of faith, knowing that I was going to have to trust the Lord to equip me to walk it out, hopefully well.
Yeah. And certainly I think that's a big line, is like when the Lord is calling you to something, we've talked about this in a previous episode, like when he calls you to something, he's going to give you what you need to accomplish that.
Yes.
And it might not all be at one time. Like he's gonna be like, here's a starter basket.
Right.
Yeah.
And now go for it. But it's gonna be like, you've built up this foundation. But now, like, I'm gonna give you this quality that you're gonna learn. I'm gonna give you this
Right.
tool to learn. I'm gonna give you
Right.
like conflict resolution skills, or all.
Yes.
Like, I'm sure being the principal, there's probably been multiple times when it's like, oh, there's some conflict, whether with
Yes.
teachers or
Yeah.
faculty, or even parents of students. Like, I'm sure, especially like with a smaller school too, like it's a little bit more maybe prevalent than
Yes.
a larger school.
You feel like your hands are really into everything. And so, yeah, you're experiencing a lot of those things. I think what's interesting, though, is I think what I thought God would do in my life through stepping into leadership, some of it was correct and some of it was very different. And I think I thought that he would grow me in all the positive ways. Meaning I thought, okay, this is going to be an opportunity for me to grow in my management of conflict and grow in my communication skills, and hopefully by his grace I have. But I would say that the most valuable lessons that I have taken from leadership are the ways that God has refined me through the fire. And I do feel like leadership tends to feel like the fiery furnace at times. And I look back on the last couple of years, and those are the things that I thank the Lord most for, were the unexpected moments of refining me, of humbling me, of me having to rely on him in a way that I had never experienced before in my life. And I think, thank you, Jesus, that he gave me the opportunity to step into that, because now on this side of it, I wouldn't want to miss it. The richness of who he is in the fire is incredible. And I would walk through the fire again to have that.
And those different fires that you have walked through, I think sometimes, and like, especially like you're leading in a Christian environment and in a Christian school, but like we were talking about, like even at Bethel, like yes, it's a Christian school, but you still have to choose your friends wisely. Like you're still gonna have those battles, and going into kind of careers and the workforce, like you have those fires, you have those conflicts. How were you able to kind of maintain that professionalism, but also integrating your Christian values? Because I know, like for me, my workplace is not a Christian workplace at all, but I could sometimes feel that tension of like the workforce and my job, but also my calling as being a lover and a follower of Jesus, and like sharing that love for Jesus as well. And I'm like, wow, like what do I do? Like this is so difficult. Like for you, like what are things that you've learned or have experienced kind of within that tension, and like what did you do about that, or how did you handle that kind of disconnect?
Yeah, of how to be both professional and a pursuer of Jesus. And I guess I would say I in my mind I can't separate them. The way that I would articulate is that who I am as a professional has everything to do with my walk with the Lord. That to be a professional means that you are careful in your words. You are careful in conflict. You are wise in conflict resolution. You are caring of those you are leading. And those are all qualities of a believer. So whether or not I articulate that in a public setting, who I am in Christ has everything to do with how I walk out being a professional. And I think I couldn't be a professional in difficult situations if I wasn't seeped in the wisdom of who Jesus is. Do I do it perfectly? Absolutely not. But then in those moments, God gives us those beautiful opportunities to reflect the gospel in seeking forgiveness and repenting and apologizing. So I guess I would say I can't separate those two. They are interwoven in who I am.
So good.
I
So
can
good.
attest to that. I could listen to you both talk like all day. It's just
Jenny's like over here like taking notes.
I know. It's just amazing. I had Heidi as a brief teaching, and then also she led this devotional group for high schoolers, and just to see your integrity and everything that you do is just like amazing and inspiring, and it's really neat to hear how like you've brought that professionalism not only to the workplace, but then also like how you run your family and your lifestyle. And it's just really impressive to see like God is everything to you. And, people say that, then they turn the other way and, do something else. Or it's just really, I don't know. I'm just blown away.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important too, like our goal, which I don't think I think you both would articulate this beautifully too, but our goal isn't to be the perfect leader.
Right.
But our goal and my goal is to be a leader that when people look at me, they see the gospel of Jesus and a passion for Jesus reflected in my life. And honestly, I feel like the times when that has been most evident hasn't been when I've done things right. It's been when I've done things wrong or I've messed up or I've just have to apologize to a student or a family or a teacher. I think of one particular scenario this year, and I had a parent call me and ask me about something, and I said, I need to start off this conversation right away with telling you I am sorry. I made the wrong call. And I would say that as a leader, it was such a gift to me to see that our relationship was actually stronger at the end of that conversation, so that I was grateful for the opportunity to walk that out. And as God does so beautifully, he's glorified in that as well.
Which is so hard too. I'm an Enneagram too. So like things like that really affect me.
Yes.
What would you say is like maybe some like practical strategies of like in those situations where it's like, I really, really want to like try so hard to embody even the leadership of Jesus and the way that he led his disciples with so much like, and even the people around him that were like mocking him and like he still loved them. It's like, what? Like, okay. But to sit in that humility, being like, this is going to refine me and I'm walking through the fire and like, this isn't to hurt me, it's to help me.
Yeah.
For you, like even going through that maybe the first time, like what were some practical strategies that you had to work on yourself so that you could get into that mindset when you had that conversation with that family where you're like, I have to start this off with saying I'm sorry?
Yeah. I think a lot of it stems down to what is God expecting of me in this leadership role? And I think that he is expecting to reveal more of himself to me, to remind me that I am his and that I am only brought to this leadership role by his grace and to reflect the gospel of Jesus. And that in the end, my identity is firmly rooted in him, not in my mistakes or what others think of me. And I think that there is such security, even knowing that imperfectly, that I don't have to perform. I don't have to do everything right. And whether or not those people that I apologize to receive it or not isn't up to me. God is the overseer of man's hearts. He's simply calling me to live out biblical principles, and then I leave the results to him. And that's not an easy lesson. I will say that I think one of the hardest things as a leader is there are times in leadership when you can't explain, and when people misunderstand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you simply cannot let them into the full scope of the story. But again, it's just another time where it's resting that God is the defender. He is the knower of all, and he knows my heart. He will call me to account, I believe, when I need to be called out. But that I can't put my hands into things that are his, that are not mine to manage.
Mhm. As you're like kind of talking through, I had kind of written down like a few things that like I've been talking with my mentors of like,
Yeah.
okay, what are some things that like you have like one-liners
Mm.
that you have kept to your heart that kind of helps with that whole integration of professionalism, faith, and
Mm-hmm.
navigating difficult conversations and leading with integrity and like leading with like I'm not I'm not always going to be right and I am going to mess up and
Yeah.
it's like a six-ish step. It's like establishing your priorities. Like
Mm-hmm.
what is your priorities? It's I'm a lover and I'm
Mm-hmm.
a follower of Jesus and like
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be I need to establish myself in the word in the
Yeah.
morning and like have
Yeah.
that routine and have that time because
Mm-hmm.
you can only truthfully give as much as you like fill
Mhm.
yourself up at the end of
Mhm.
the day too. So like
Right.
in those like hard conversations like you probably wouldn't have been acting like that if you weren't in the
Mhm.
word. You probably would have been like, "No, you're wrong. You're
Yeah.
actually wrong. I'm right." Where it's
Yeah.
like, "Nope, I'm for sure wrong. That was
Yeah.
not the choice." And then kind of going into like intentionally acting out your faith, like in
Mm-hmm.
how you were saying, like, you can't professionalism and faith can be intertwined in the same thing, but like being
Yeah.
intentional in the way that you act out in faith,
Mm-hmm.
being intentional with your words, being
Mm-hmm.
intentional with how you maybe treat someone, like even if it was like, you know, Jenny did something bad or
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
but and you see Jenny in the hallway, but all these students here, like how are you going to treat Jenny in front of her students? Like,
Right.
is it going to be of like disrespect or respect?
Mhm.
Right.
And
Mhm.
you want to like if you're going to intentionally choose, you're going to want to choose respect to honor Jenny in front of
Mhm.
her students and not
Right.
discredit her, I guess.
Mhm.
Well, and
Mhm.
I think professionalism and leadership means that I have to understand what my role as a leader is.
hmm
And I would say that the Bible has a lot to say about that. But one of the key components or one of the key truths that I would say is important to leadership is that it's not about me as the leader. It's not about what's going to make me look good or make me feel good or make me feel heard. It is, am I shepherding and leading my team so that they are thriving in the role that God has called them to do? And when I enter their classrooms, when I enter it and maybe things are going totally off,
Jenny,
off the
calm your
rails
classroom
and
down.
I yeah, I'm so sorry.
it happens to all of us. I remember I thought, why did when I was a teacher, it was always the days when things were mass chaos,
You're like,
when
why
my
me?
administrator would pop in to just say hi and see how things were
You're
going.
like, I
But
promise I can do my job.
yeah. But I think as a leader, when I'm walking into somebody's classroom that I'm leading, and let's say things aren't going well, my job then is to mentor and encourage and to strengthen them in the giftings that I believe that they have so that they feel equipped not to be perfect, but to grow and to learn and to um, be better at the job that God has called them to do. And I
Yes.
think having that perspective is really an important part of being an effective professional leader.
That's so good. And even in that, like, in what you were saying of like taking that time to mentor and to
Mm-hmm.
help the other person
Mm-hmm.
grow,
Yeah.
like managing your time and embracing that flexibility too, I
Mm-hmm.
think is so important. Like being like, I'm gonna take this time. Like I
Mm-hmm.
might have a meeting to go to, but I
Mm-hmm.
can do that at another time. It's not super important. Like I'm gonna embrace this flexibility right now to pour into this teacher, pour into this
Yeah.
coworker, things like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that because I think even in the Bible we see that so many times. Like Jesus is like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna be here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm gonna be here
Yeah.
because this is where I'm needed now. Like this person can wait.
Yeah. Yeah. There were two books I will say that had a really profound impact on my walk with the Lord that then really impacted leadership for me. And one of them was by Lisa Turkhurst called The Best Yes. And I think
I love
oftentimes
Lisa.
yes, I do
So
too.
good.
I think those of us who step into leadership are oftentimes the people who say yes to everything. We want to do well, we want to succeed. And it's this constant balance of, am I doing this because I want to please everybody else, or am I doing this because God has called me to it? And I think in a really beautiful way, she articulated the importance of saying no and how to discern what I need to say no to, so that what God is actually calling me to is done well.
Mm.
And I think that is the constant balance all leaders walk.
Yeah.
But I think, again, if I'm going to be a godly leader that leads my team well, then I have to be really careful that I'm balancing what I say yes to and what I prioritize, so that I'm ready to lead them well as a team.
And with that too, especially like team, like you were, I mean, I'm sure like Jenny looks to you as like more like that accountability partner. And for you, like seeking accountability for yourself, you know, in your career, how did you seek out those people? Maybe it was even in like college, especially like we do have a lot of college listeners, especially as they are heading into the workforce and graduating. How did you navigate like seeking that accountability? Like having someone that's like, hey, Heidi, that was probably not what you should have done.
Yeah.
Maybe let's try this next time, kind of thing.
Yeah. I think as I've pursued accountability, I have learned that I have to be careful, that I have to be discerning, and that I have to take my time. I think I've learned the hard way that sharing things that I need someone to speak into my life are like handing over treasures. And there have been seasons where I've handed over things of great value to people too quickly, and they have not proven to be responsible with that treasure. And so for me, I have learned I have to take the time to get to know someone over time before I invite them in to that sweet space of accountability.
That's really good.
Yeah, I also think that as I've gotten older too, years ago I probably thought I needed 6. Now I think I'll take 2. Just 2 people in my life that I know I can be honest with them, and that they are able to see into key components of my life for the moments when I don't feel like I want to share. And it's not easy to hear from them sometimes, but boy, have they proven to be trustworthy. And in the long run, I know that when they speak and call me out, it is for my good.
That is so good, because I think I feel like I'm turning into you in a way. Like I always thought I needed
Love it.
6.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I really truthfully think I only have like maybe 3 or 4 people.
Comes with age, let me tell you.
honestly, like my birthday's coming up here soon. So maybe it's just with the birthday coming up and I'm like 1 year closer to 30. Who knows? But it's also interesting too, because I look at those 4 people and they're all very different.
Yes.
And I have people who speak into my life that aren't even Christians, that call me up, be like, you're acting off.
Yes.
You're not acting how you are. Because I think sometimes when you surround yourself too, not to say this is a bad thing, but with all people of similar values, such a good thing. But to have that 1 or 2 people that just truthfully are a good human being, and maybe they are not a believer, that's okay. But they are a good person who has good values that can call you out and be like, you're not doing what you should be doing. It's a very interesting, like, I'm gonna name call her out right now, and I'll ask for forgiveness later. But my friend Jordan, like, she's not a believer, but I tell her, like, she is my close inner circle, and I tell her things that I'm struggling with. I'm like, girl, I don't know what to do, and she's like, well, you need to fall back on the Lord. Number 1, that is your foundation. But then 2, she can call me out of like, even in the circumstances of like business situations, she's like, I probably would have done this a little bit differently. And it's all rooted down to that Christian value and that Christian faith. And then I have like people like Jenny where I'm like, girl, I need help. Can we just pray? And I mean, I've even like talked to Meg and Alicia, and like we have
Mhm.
that little like lightning bolt when we're having
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
situation come up, and then we're like, okay, if we know there's a lightning bolt, say a little prayer.
Mhm.
And that
Yes.
accountability too, and that's something that I always fall back on, and I've
Mhm.
told my middle school girls, I'm like,
Mhm.
embrace the people that you have right now,
Yeah.
and seek that accountability with them, even if it's like
Mhm.
you have no words, send an emoji, like you have a
Yeah.
signal,
Yeah.
and that signal means I need you to say a little prayer, or I need someone to call me.
Yeah.
And I even have that with my non-Christian friends too, of like,
Mhm.
hey, you're my people. Here's
Yeah.
the passcode.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say a little addition to that is I'm learning more too how Jesus has to be my first go-to.
Mhm.
Mm,
And typically, if I go to my people first, there is a lot of extra emotion and I would say superfluous details that come flooding out. And sometimes I need that release.
mhm.
But I do find when I go to his word first, he resets my heart and he gives me peace that only he can give. And there have been so many times where, especially just through some difficult seasons of leadership, where I need to go to him because I don't have to explain it all.
Mhm.
I don't want to rehash it all. I
Mhm.
don't want a long conversation. I just need his word to permeate my heart. And I need to rest in the fact that he gets it and
Mhm.
just lay it at his feet. And I think the beautiful thing is he gives us both. He gives us people and he gives us his presence. And they are both such incredible gifts from him.
What would be like when you're in that situation of
Mhm.
like, I need to go to the Lord, like, what is your go to, especially for someone who maybe isn't as versed in the Bible?
Mhm.
And like, obviously, the importance is to get in the Word first,
Mhm.
to seek and be in the presence of the Lord,
Yeah.
because ultimately He's going to guide you in what to do next
Mhm.
through the people and the places and the situations around you. Like, He's going to work through those, but you being
Yeah.
aware of His presence in those situations.
Yeah.
What is like a common go-to for you, or something that you typically do in those situations that someone who maybe has been a Christian their whole life or
Mhm.
not can kind of implement maybe now in their kind of
Mhm.
starting career
Mhm.
as they're navigating this?
You mean a strategy for how
Yeah.
I pursued the
Yeah.
Lord? Um, I guess I can think of two things. I think it's been really critical that I learn how to read the Bible. Whether that's through a mentor or Bible studies were really key for me. And I needed to make sure that I was pursuing the Lord. How can I say this? In a meaty way, in a deep and meaningful
Mhm.
way, in the seasons that felt um, peaceful and more balanced, and where I had the capacity to learn in a deeper way,
Mm.
so that when I entered times of fire, all of those things, all of those truths, it was kind of like I had built up the savings account of knowledge of the Lord. And so when I felt depleted and when I felt weak, I could call back some of those truths and say, you know what? I'm going through a really hard time right now. I know that the book of First Peter talks beautifully into suffering. I'm going to go just sit there for a
Mhm.
while. This isn't going to be a season where I'm going to become a theologian. This is just going to be a place where I'm going to sit in this one chapter that I have learned to love, and I'm going to read it over and over and over again. And oftentimes, with the rhythm of education, I feel like there is meatier study that takes place in my life during summer vacation because I can mentally take in more information. And then I fall back on those things during the school year that I have gleaned during the summer. And in a particular fiery season I went through, there was 3 months where I read one psalm 5 times a day because it
Wow.
was all I could process. It so beautifully matched the cry of my heart, and I couldn't do any more. And I think that's the beauty of the Christian walk is there are seasons that we delve deeply into theology, and there are times where we simply rest in who Jesus is. And I think that we need to do both.
Mhm.
I just thought of like Joseph's dream too, where he knew
Yeah.
that the famine was coming through God's visions. So he's like, we
Yes.
have to build up a lot of food because like the hard times are coming, and how God
Yes.
can just give you those tools and equip you. It's just amazing how it sounds like you have that community of people who can help lift you up, and then you also have the Lord that's also lifting you up, and
Yeah.
knowing that you don't have to do it on your own is just so powerful, because sometimes we do isolate ourselves and we think we can, like,
Yeah.
all right, God, you've equipped me, I'm going to try to do it on my own, and then you start to fall and you start to sink, and then you have that accountability and you send out that lightning bolt and you're like, oh, nope, I need some more prayer, and just it's that
Yeah.
cycle, and I think it's so important to not get lost in that hopelessness and to keep resting and recharging too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I even think of the Olympics are coming up.
Right.
And I think, what if these athletes, I guess I think of the Olympics as the time of kind of like the time of fire, the time of testing, the time where it's really hard and they have to show kind of what they're made of. And no Olympic athlete is going to not prepare for that. And I think that as we look at the scriptures, God promises that we're going to face seasons of struggle. He promises that we're going to be brought into the fire. He promises to meet us there. But I think knowing that during seasons of rest or during times when we don't feel the heat so intently, we need to make sure that we are spending time in the Word and strengthening our knowledge of who He is and our knowledge of how to navigate the tool that He's given us, so that when we hit the fire, we are ready.
It'll be like muscle memory at that
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
oftentimes is. That's a great way to describe it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you go through so much of that just in life, but also in like your career too. Like there's
Yeah.
going to be times where, you're in crisis mode, or there's 1,001 things that are due, and you feel like you're like, why am I doing this? Like I'm going through, I feel like that right now. Like Jenny and I have talked into depth about it, and I'm like, oh, I just need the Lord. And earlier we were talking about like my insomnia, and it's like I'm going 1,000 miles an hour that I haven't rested.
Yeah.
I haven't just sat and rested in the Lord. And I, even as a young professional, like, although I want to like get to this point in my life or get to this J-Lo wedding planner dream, like there needs to take that time to keep accountability with myself and the Lord
Yeah.
and getting in the Word, but also like keeping that accountability with my friends. Like I was snapping my friend Allie, and I was like, she sent me a picture of her Bible, and I was like, I haven't been in my Bible at all. She's like, girl, get it. Like, what are you
Yes.
doing? And I'm like, I know. Like, and she's just like called me out. She's like, okay, well, you're sending me a picture when you read your Bible. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I forgot to do that though. So
Well, and I think
whoops.
just having our own, like, Lord, where do I even begin, can feel daunting sometimes. And that's where, for me, Bible studies have been really key. And
Yes.
sometimes that's the accountability of actually being a part of a Bible study where I have to show up at a certain time and I have to have some homework done. And but sometimes it's just ordering and purchasing a self-study. And that just gives me, okay, Lord, I'm going to do page 2 today. All right, Lord, we're going to be on page 3 tomorrow. And it helps to establish a rhythm that maybe I'm too tired to establish for
It goes back
myself.
to your establishing your priorities.
It
And it's like
does.
that
It
the leadership
does.
in your career, like once you're establishing your priorities, like I mean, truthfully, like setting your day up for success. Like,
Yeah.
when I was in not the bottom of bottoms right now, like it was like I got up at 5, I went to the gym, I did my Bible study, I made breakfast, I was ready to go for work, and now I'm like, yep, I rolled out of bed at 8:45, I work at 9. And now I'm realizing the importance of that because I've seen the shift. I've seen the
Yes.
shift in my career
Mhm.
and my mindset, and how when I was doing the things that were my priorities was pouring into myself through
Yes.
physical activity, through spiritual drinking of the living water, truthfully, that I was like, wow, my days seem a lot easier. Where now I'm like, I'm struggling. I just want to go back to bed. And as I'm sure you've probably seen in your career, there was probably those instances where you saw that something was off. And it's like,
Yeah.
something's off. It was probably either you're not getting in the Word as much, or the Lord is almost calling you out in a way of like, Heidi, whoa, 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 whoa. We got to reset here. We got to go back to those priorities.
Yeah. Well, and oftentimes when I would hit those seasons of struggle, I would have to ask myself, is this because I'm not prioritizing what is important and I need to reset those again? Or is it because God's preparing me for something else? And oftentimes I have to go back and make sure those priorities are in order first to ensure that I'm correctly hearing from the Lord. Because there are times he builds some maybe discontent, for a lack of a better word, in us to start to stir us to move on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
But I better make sure that I have those other things in place so that I am listening and attuned to him when he says, now's the time to go. Now's the
Mm-hmm.
time to make a shift or a change.
Absolutely. And when I was kind of talking through with a couple of mentors on,
Mhm.
this topic and like diving deeper into your
Mhm.
experience, the other kind of last little bit was like finding purpose in your work.
Mhm.
Like it's kind of like
Mhm.
the passage where it talks about like how every part of the body has a purpose. Like the hand
Yeah.
can't be a foot, the foot
Yeah.
can't be a hand.
Yeah.
And seeking out purpose, because I feel like sometimes in society we can try going out of college, you're like, I need a job because I need to make money because that's how
Mhm.
you live in this world.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do get stuck with a job where you're like, well, this is a job.
Mhm.
But finding that purpose, like, and
Mhm.
that joy, it can be so hard.
Mhm.
But finding purpose and joy in what you're doing, like
Mhm.
you don't have to do it, but you get to do it.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of two components to that. One is, what is the purpose of work? Well, the purpose of work is to glorify the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So, can I glorify the Lord by how I file papers in an office? Absolutely. Can I glorify the Lord teaching science in a Christian environment? Yes, I can. Um, but I think it's also important to specifically ask the Lord, would you let me see what you have for me today? Lord, I want to be used by you. I want to be a vessel, for people for others to know about
Mm-hmm.
you. So as I go about my day, whether it's at a job I love or not, would you put opportunities before me? And one of my favorite stories, I had a desire to mentor someone, but I knew that there's so many things in life that you cannot manipulate, that it has to be the Lord. And so I just started praying. I'm like, Lord, would you put someone in my path? And it was during this season of life that I happened to step aside from leading worship at our church for a while because I felt like life was getting a little too full and I wasn't doing anything well, but I
You
felt
said too many
compelled.
yeses.
I had said way too many yeses to wonderful things, but I didn't want to fully step aside from serving in our church. So I thought, I'm going to be on the prayer team. And so I was standing at the front of the church, and this beautiful young lady came up to me and asked for prayer. And I thought this was just a nice opportunity to pray for someone. And yet, out of a situation that I didn't manipulate, that I simply had obeyed God for something else, He birthed this beautiful mentorship that has been an
Mm.
incredible blessing to me in my life. And I think that we sometimes underestimate what God can do when we're willing to ask him for it.
Yeah. It's like my little journal here that says it's from Matthew 7:7, like ask and it will be given to you, seek and you'll
Mhm.
find, knock and the door will be open to you.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
I mean, even our like little tagline is boldly seek, boldly ask, and boldly love. Like
Yes.
boldly ask for God to move you and boldly
Yeah.
seek after the Lord because eventually he's going to knock, like you're going to knock and he's going to open up that door. And that's the door that he's gonna be like, now go.
Yeah.
And like I remember doing a sermon on Matthew 7:7, and it was just kind of like how I almost feel like Matthew 7:7 is like another
Mm.
part to the Great Commission.
Yeah.
And it's like when you're sitting with the Lord and you're allowing him to move in you and you're asking and you're seeking after him, like when you knock, he's gonna be like, go.
Yes.
And then he's gonna be like, I need you to move in this space.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then you're gonna go and make disciples in
Yeah.
that space as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so
Yeah.
good. So good. Jenny, you got anything?
I'm just so encouraged to hear like how the community of believers can come together, whether you're listening to this in your car on your way to work, or whether you're just like taking a jog or walking your dog or just sitting with your family listening. I'm just encouraged by how God can move through whatever situation you're going through right now, whether you enjoy your career path that you're in or you are actually thinking of changing your career path too. I hope that the message of professionalism and faith can be an encouraging one, and one that is filled with hope and guidance and, respect for the Lord and finding that loyalty through those believers. Yeah.
Well said.
Thank
Well
you.
said.
Snaps to that, Jenny. Well, Heidi, we always like to end each episode with a challenge for the listeners and kind of something to take away that's like either like a tactical thing, like whether if it's a certain like chapter that they should be reading or just something that's a little bit more on like the practical side, like 15 minutes a day, go for a walk and pray with the Lord. In the sense of professionalism and balancing, maybe a college student going into their professional career or someone who's been in the workforce who may be struggling with trying to balance that professionalism and faith. What is a challenge that you would encourage the listeners to kind of sit with this week?
Yeah. I'm gonna kind of give a call out for probably my favorite book I have ever read. And it is called Humble Roots by Hannah Anderson. And I think if there's anybody that wants to learn about leadership or about how to balance professionalism and leadership, I think one of the key qualities that is absolutely critical to it is understanding what humility is, gospel humility. And when I read this book by Hannah Anderson, it completely, changed my life, changed my perspective and my understanding of the gospel and understanding what gospel humility is. And so I would say if you're wanting a practical tool, it's a great starting place.
That's awesome.
That's so good. Well, Heidi, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It was
You're
such a pleasure
welcome.
talking
My
with
pleasure.
you, all the things, talking about Jesus. It is something we are truly passionate about as we look at, the life and ministry of Boldly Seeking and just being intentional in everyday life. And what do we do every day? We work and we lead. And whether we are a leader or a manager in our workforce or not, like you can lead in any sense. And so I think this is just such a great episode as we're starting season 3. People are heading back into the fall. Like, it's just such perfect timing. God divine timing. And
Amen.
you're such a pleasure and a joy to talk to. And I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it has
thank
been
you.
a great joy of mine to be here with both of you as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And friends, thank you for joining us again this week. We are so excited that you continue to join us every single week. And we have more exciting things coming up over the next few weeks. So make sure that you are catching us on the gram. Make sure you are connecting with us so that you are staying up to date on all the things Boldly Seeking. So we'll see you back here in a few weeks. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe and rate our show to stay up to date on our latest episode releases. We'd love to hear from you, so head on over to our website or the gram, say hi, be encouraged, and join the movement as we continue to boldly seek after Jesus together. We'll see you next time on the Between the Pages podcast.